It's nothing was lacking love. And that's the one thing that surprised me. Everything had tactile presence, and it's like it was made from consciousness, with consciousness, in consciousness. The beauty of life and how much everything is made from a loving presence once you get in touch with that in the moment mind rather than the logical analytical part. To actually feel something like that, because I'd never felt anything like that in my life, being in an abusive home, it was lacking all of that. I couldn't have even told you what love felt like until I was in this place. I had no religious upbringing, so I had no perceptions of what to expect on the other side. As I say, I often put it down to people having religious backgrounds and things like that. Well, I had none of that. I had no idea of that sort of concept.
Good evening and welcome to Earth to the Other Side. My name is John Glasspool, your host, and tonight I am speaking to Christopher Wesselingh, who had an NDE back when he was 15 years old in 1972, and it was a drowning accident, and he's going to tell us all about it. Thank you so very much for being with us. How you doing, Christopher?
I'm very good, thank you very much, and much appreciated for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to meet you.
It's a pleasure to meet you as well, and thank you so much for being on the show. I'm really happy about that. So, why don't we get started with your experience back in 1972? Tell us all about it.
The situation itself was in a school swimming pool. I don't remember too much of the lead up to it. I didn't have very good swimming skills at the time, and I'd gone into the deep end of the school swimming pool. I was okay so long as I could have feet on the bottom, but in this situation, I didn't. I thought I'd be okay, but obviously not. I lost contact with the edge of the pool, was out beyond reach, and I just started sinking. And I remember panicking. There was quite a great sense of panic. I was trying to get to the top. I couldn't. And the one thing that happened clearly that came through is I remember that first mouthful of water. And as soon as it hit my lungs, I was gone. It's like there was no body awareness. I was aware of this tunnel of light, which is the classic description, but it really was. And it wasn't just a visual experience, it was a tactile experience as well. It was soft, it was gentle, but it was drawing me along this tunnel. And it wasn't going directly upwards, it was sort of forward and probably at about a 35-degree angle. So it was going out on an angle, and I was just drawn into it. And I sort of popped out on the other side, which was almost like being born onto the other side. And as I popped out, I noticed that it once again had a very gentle tactile sensation. It was almost like standing on cotton wool, but it was solid enough to support me. And that sort of environment and tactile sensation was available everywhere. My feelings weren't limited to just my body. I could feel virtually everything in the atmosphere, even what appeared to be the air itself had a tactile sensation. Everything had a sense of presence. When I started orientating to where I was, I moved forward a bit and the scene appeared before me where I had like a pond in front of me. It was probably 15, 20 meters wide. And on the other side was a gentleman sitting in a chair with a classic long white beard, a very gentle presence. There was a lot of blue sort of above, almost like sky, but not quite, but just around in the atmosphere itself. There was something that appeared like grass, but was a different color to grass, but yet had a similarity to it. But the focus I had was virtually on this gentleman. And we started almost interacting, but it wasn't his words. It was like full perceptions dropping in one go. You'd have a whole concept go across to him, and a concept had come back. And there was a sense of welcoming, but it was the whole body sensation of welcoming dropping in one go. There was a sense of greeting after that. And then I got this sensation coming through of, how would I describe it? the totality of life, and it's trying to describe something with words that doesn't fit into words because it wasn't limited. There was a beauty, benefit, and completion in life itself, the life experience. And I could see that the life I'd had was actually beautiful and there was worth in it. Now, this was interesting because I'd been born up in a battered and abused home, and I certainly didn't, up till this moment, have that experience of my life. So to have that with life was quite a revelation in itself. And it changed my perspective on life. And it also was the thing that helped because at the moment that I knew it was time to come back, because I'd seen the beauty of life, it made me open to coming back. I knew within the experience I had the opportunity to stay or return, but I knew returning it wasn't demanded, but it was the preferred option. And I could see it, this was where I was still meant to go. It was like a choice, but it was like there was no choice. And I couldn't go but where that sense of life drew me. And there was other bits going back and forward of just the gentle presence, the encompassing love that is available for all beings and all of experience. It's like even experiences are made from love and felt in love and with love. And this was just everywhere. It's nothing was lacking love. And that's the one thing that surprised me. And everything was tactile. Even the thoughts were tactile or the perceptions. It wasn't like a thought where you think and then you build on story. Because it was a whole concept, everything had tactile presence, and it's like it was made from consciousness, with consciousness, in consciousness. And that's the one thing that I found later on in life. Because once I left this experience itself, I sort of went on with life for a while until I had some other experiences, and then I started to get in spirituality, and it got me back in touch with this. That the beauty of life and how much everything is made from a loving presence once you get in touch with that in the moment mind rather than the logical analytical part. But yeah, that's almost another story in itself in some ways. But back to that experience, a lot of it was just helping me find a sense of presence within myself, peace within myself, and it was almost undoing the childhood I had in a way with the trauma of the childhood. It was being undone, and I was showing there was another way, which I think was also important for me feeling willing to come back and to actually feel something like that, because I'd never felt anything like that in my life. You know, being in an abusive home, it was lacking all of that. I couldn't have even told you what love felt like until I was in this place. I had no religious upbringing, so I had no perceptions of what to expect on the other side. But later on in life, when I heard the stories, you know, how other people talk about, you know, a presence on the other side, mine obviously appeared as a personality, but how everybody saw it often as the person in white. To find it was the same for me was quite interesting. As I say, you know, I often put it down to people having religious backgrounds and things like that. Well, I had none of that. I had no idea of that sort of concept. So something was there and something that was shown to me in a way that is similar to others. And I still don't know how I describe that, but I found it was a presence that was most receptive in the time of need. And there's something else I want to say about it. I'm trying to get the words for it. I think it's almost like a primal image that we're most open to. Something that feels open, receptive. It's like in our core emotions, we all know what we're looking for, and it appears in that form that we're most open to.
Mm.
And that was quite a revelation for me. And I didn't really realize that until later, because there's almost like everything in that place, all the primal needs we have were present. There was nothing felt left out. There was nothing left to add. There was nothing that could have made it better. It was a peace, a tranquility, and a harmony in itself with consciousness. And that's the bit that intrigued me. Like, it was very conscious. There was nothing that wasn't known, and there was nothing that wasn't available.
Mm.
And later on in life, once I've started getting into the sort of spiritual side of things, which I did through Buddhism and various other paths, I found that this place and that availability of information was accessible again. And I've been able to access it since then. And once again, I find it's actually an aspect of consciousness where literally everything that we need is there. We've just got to get into that aspect of consciousness, access it, and translate it through to the physical world and how it applies to our everyday life. It's been benefit and it's been overwhelming at times, because sometimes the amount of knowledge that's there can be quite intense. Having availability of knowledge is one thing. Knowing what to do with it is a completely different story. So even though the experience originally finished for me, in that moment of experience, aspects of it been available to me ever since, and being able to access the other side. Where people go when they pass over has been available. Being able to follow others through when they're passing over has been available. So there's various things that come from it. I also find the guiding spirit that is available on the other side. I've found access to that and a sense of guidance in my own life that can be spoken to and interacted with, and can also be interacted with for others as well. And once again, it's learning the vibration that it resonates with. Like I find on the physical realm, things have slowed their vibration down to become physical and appear in the physical. Whereas in that place we've gone to, this, everything had a higher vibration. You know, we talk about raising our vibration, which is raising consciousness. This was my first introduction to it, which only later did I put the bits together. Like, even when I talk about it now, I can feel it. I can feel the gentleman as if he's still there. It's almost like he's listening. You know, even though that time had finished, the presence and traces that it left never actually leave. And this is when I find we have a real experience. We can physically leave the experience, but the experience doesn't leave us. So feeling that place, everything was at a different vibration. It was such a high vibration that couldn't appear as physical, which is, you know, when I say I was standing on the ground, it felt like cotton wool. That was like the most solid experience it could give me, to feel supported. But that was just a sense of comfort that was conveyed. For me to have a sense of ground, a sense of familiarity with what was available.
When you were going through this tunnel, um, so it appeared in front of you, right? Not sort of on top, it, I guess, sort of in front.
It was about at this angle, sort of
Okay.
leading this way. As I say, about 30 degrees approximately.
What did it look like it was made out of?
The only experience I had at the time was light. It just appeared as such a bright light. It was the intensity of looking into the sun. It was mostly white, but it had slight elements of yellowing around parts of it, almost like a golden yellow. But most of it was virtually pure white. It had the intensity of the sun, but it didn't hurt the eyes.
Mhm.
And it just had such a place of clarity and presence with it. And there was no sense of consciousness there, as in there was on the other side when I arrived. It's like there was consciousness with knowing. This was just presence, which is, I equate to almost like awareness, but it had purpose behind it, whereas awareness itself just is awareness.
Mhm.
Yeah. It was interesting. Temperature, I wouldn't say there was a temperature, but there wasn't lack of temperature. It was almost like that neutral ground where you're not feeling lack, but you're not feeling overheated. It was that middle ground where everything was just in the perfect line.
And did you
And
see your body in the water, or did you sort of just separate from that?
totally separated from the body. As I, as soon as that first mouthful of water hit the lungs, I was into this tunnel of light and I was just going. And
Hmm.
there was no real body presence, sensation, or anything left at all. And which is interesting because when I got told it was time to come back, I actually got myself out of it. But as I was watching it in that process, I sort of stepped out of the place where I was on the other side and I was in a sort of holding pattern. And I was aware of something that was moving my body but didn't feel like me. And the body got to the side of the pool and I came back into the body as soon as, how would I put it? There was a raised edge at the side of the swimming pool. The body got over that and some water was running out of it. I was aware of it and I was watching it from outside. And as soon as the water ran out, some air managed to get in the lungs. And as soon as that air hit the lungs, I was back, fully present, fully in the body, coughing, choking, spluttering. And
Had someone
part of me
revived
went,
you?
what the? No, that was the strange thing. And it intrigued me because theoretically I shouldn't have been able to get myself out. But as I say, it was really weird because my body got itself out, but it's like it wasn't me moving the body. I was aware of something that had come into the body and was in front of me doing it, which I can't explain any other way. It really was like another personality in the body moved it,
Hmm.
and that was it. But as I say, some water ran out, and as soon as it did, I was back in the body again.
And when you had woken up as, 15-year-old kid, woken up, I mean, come back to life, essentially. So what was going through your mind at that time?
What struck me is there were some other friends who were in the swimming pool at the time, but they were sort of quite a way up the swimming pool on another side. And I was surprised that no, like I was hanging over this edge, coughing and choking. I'd sort of looked sideways, caught a sight of them. Nobody else was noticing what was going on. Nobody else was figuring anything was out of place. Like I was really coughing and choking a lot. I was struggling to get air into the lungs. More water had still been coming out. Um, and it was like, what the heck's going on? I knew I'd been somewhere, I knew what had happened, but I also still retained that I knew it was time to come back.
Hmm.
But I had no context or framework within my logical mind that I could put this in. So partly what I did is I buried the experience for a while. I just sort of never spoke about it, never talked about it, never mentioned it. And it was only years later, like I knew I'd had it, like that bit was there, but I had no external interaction. I didn't try and explain it to anybody. I didn't try and share it. I just got on with life. Um, and part of that was due to the upbringing, because of the upbringing I had, you just learned to deal with things. I didn't tell people. I never mentioned much.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, you just handled what came and got on with it,
Do you
which
remember the
is,
first time you heard about NDEs?
I probably would have been 22 or 23. I'd left home at 18 to get a job. And yeah, it would have been about 22, 23. I was starting to get books and alternative subjects and go into that. And I came across one on that had a story about near death experience in it. And I went, I knew this. I knew what the person was talking about. I knew what it was like. It was really quite a revelation to me that this is what it was. And to have somebody describe it really did open me up a lot. And that's when I started to access back towards that. As I remembered it, that knowing, that inner knowing that was available there started to come through. And it was a bit overwhelming at times because, as I say, sometimes it had a knowledge of stuff that I didn't necessarily want to know or wasn't particularly looking to know, but it was there. And a lot of it was, what do I do with this? So I found it quite confusing at times, but yet when I got knowledge on something that was happening in my life and it was helpful, I could see the benefit of it. And once again, I sort of learned to stuff that I didn't make sense of, I just put to the side. I didn't reject it. I didn't push it away. I just sort of set it on the side and figured that if something came along that helped me make sense of it, I'd do something with it. But it was just somewhere to put it at the time. Yeah,
Do you
and
remember the
since
first
then,
time you spoke about it with anyone?
first time I would have spoken about it would have been about 28 years old, 29 years old. I had an accident in 1985 when I was 27 years old, which left me with what was referred to as severe disabilities. And sort of trying to get a handle on life again, I come across a spiritualist church and I went to that. And I started to meet people who were able to talk to me about these things. About 3 years after that, I'd come in contact with a Buddhist monk. He taught me to meditate. And I started to be able to go internally and really got proficient at going into this and other experiences that were coming along as well. And I spent a lot of time developing the ability to access anything that I could come across, both in consciousness and outside consciousness. Yeah, I've just been on a journey of exploration and development since then.
It's amazing.
Yeah, literally, I found anything we want's available. There is nothing that isn't available for us if we're open to it. But it's learning to open up not just our analytical mind, it's opening up the emotions, or what people refer to as heart center, where we feel. I've had a contact with what I refer to as soul consciousness inside myself. I found that in my heart. Once again, I wasn't looking for it. I just found myself in it one day.
Mm.
And I could see that was the part of me that had the experience of traveling to the other side, which really did help opening up a doorway to further contact with those areas.
The being in your experience, who do
Yep.
you who do you suppose it was?
I don't have a name for it. A lot of people that do visitations to the other side or talk to loved ones on that, they love getting names. And I'll give you an experience I had. I've been able to talk to what is referred to as people's guides and things like that. I don't usually get them as past loved ones. I get them as beings that are beyond form. They can appear in form that people are comfortable with, whereas they can appear as a person's loved one. But very early on, I realized this wasn't their original or true form. So I asked them to appear in their pure form, and they appear as beings of light. That's the way they've been.
Mm-hmm.
Only twice have I been able to get a name, and both of those occasions were when I was talking to somebody who had an immediate past relative, and they gave me a name that this person went, oh, yeah, they just died, and started to give me the story. But I was talking to a group of these beings one day, and I asked them their name. So they get together, got in a circle and started talking, and it goes, oh, well, we could use this, we could use that. What if we give him this one? And they mention a name, they go, oh, yeah, he seems to be happy with that. To them, they don't attach to name or labels because they feel each other. And within that feeling, there is no need to label because we're known by our presence. And, that brings me back to a phrase. We can use whatever descriptions we want or tell whatever stories we want, but we'll be known by our deeds. And in that place, they are known by their presence, their knowledge, and their actions, and the role they fulfill. Labels aren't a part of that process because the labels are limitations. The other thing I got shown later on in the journey is, we have names that we use for this body that I've got, which is referred to as Christopher. But I've had other lives with other names. So who am I? And it became very clear I'm not any particular name in particular. So the names aren't important, which is a continuation of the lesson these guides had given me. Names and labels aren't important. It's the presence of a thing, which helped me learn to tap into things in this world. When I experience something, I don't experience just its physical form. Everything has a vibrational range. When I tap into its vibration, I can tap into the consciousness of the thing. And if you follow that back, everything's made from source consciousness. It's just slowed itself down to appear in form, and each form has a part of the journey. And that journey completes what its role is here on this earth, to help us learn something, experience something, get in touch, or to the expression of something, which includes ourselves. So once again, we've got that, the whole life path is reflected and mirrored in everyone and everything. Everything has a purpose, everything has a presence, and nothing is wasted.
Yeah.
It intrigued me because, most humans, we get caught up in this wanting a name, label, and quantify things.
Mm-hmm.
And people love using names. I've spoken to this and that. Sometimes it's realizing it's not the name that's important. It's the consciousness that comes with that being. And when we get that line of communication, it's the knowledge and information and state of being that's important. The label has no relevance whatsoever. In some cases, when somebody's passing over, there is the energy form that was the spirit or is the spirit of that past loved one, relative, or whoever is familiar to that person that they're comfortable with. So you can get that entity that was known as Uncle George, father, mother, grandparents, whatever. But there are other times that person or past loved one may be in a significant part of the journey which isn't appropriate to interrupt. So another being can take on their energy to meet that person who is newly arriving. When the process is completed, that energy is just given back. It's not like it's taken as a separation. It's just sort of extended out to this being who takes on that energy, that consciousness, that form for the relevant period of time. And then it is allowed to return to the person from which it was extended out from. Yeah, a lot of it depends on the person's comfort level. And a lot of it can be programming as well. Most people I find when they get to the other side, they realize things are different to the way they perceived in the physical world. One of the biggest things that disappears is the belief in separation. Once you get the other side, most of us understand the sense of connection there and we get used to it. We merge into this experience of connection, which wasn't available here on earth. And when we get into this connection, we start realizing nothing's separate. It feels like water that is expressed as variations of form that have humanoid shapes. We can see past pets and things like that. We see other people, but we don't just see them as the person, we see them as the consciousness that is no longer limited by the body form. It sees what it was consciousness or conscious of in the form, and it sees what it was yet to be conscious of in the form. Mm-hmm. So it takes on the awareness of the lessons yet to be learned in form, which is where we prepare ourselves for the next life. The consciousness on the other side is the way I understand it. Age there and time there is not in linear time as we have it. It's in the amount of consciousness that form has. Somebody could have lived 1,000 lives and not develop consciousness much at all. So they may still appear as a young child because that's the level of their evolution into pure or full consciousness. The being that I saw that appeared on the seat appeared as a senior person with a big long white beard and a presence of knowledge and knowing. that level of knowledge and knowing appeared as their age, but the age is reflective of their level of knowledge. So time to them is not clock time, it's evolutionary scale time, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like age and aging where you became old and, we think we become dilapidated, the body starts breaking down. Doesn't happen. They just become more senior. And there's a point where you go beyond form and just become light. That's when you're starting to get into pure consciousness, where all of this level of creation, as we perceive it, even guides and our spirit guides have their spirit guides, and their spirit guides have their spirit guides. Everything is a progression of evolution from one stage to the next. Each layer is helping the layers above and below where appropriate.
Mm.
Even we help the layers that appear above us because we come down the physical realm to have experiences that they don't have available. So through our physical experience, we're conveying back to consciousness. We're essentially putting things into consciousness. We're understanding interaction. We're understanding connection with life. Some of us connect to life. Some of us have experiences that we reject life and do things that deteriorate the body and affect it health-wise and various other things. And it's learning to come back to life, to reinstore that life energy. And as we learn this, we learn life and consciousness are essentially the same thing. And life and consciousness are love. You cannot separate those three. But there is a point where you go into pure consciousness, or I should say into pure love, and you go through love into pure consciousness. A lot of people think love and consciousness are the same thing, but I find you actually go through love to get into pure consciousness, which is where all form disappears. There is no form at all. There's no perception of form. It's just pure consciousness. Mm-hmm. Before that, there is consciousness and love merging through form, but they're like an offshoot of pure consciousness. And it's the love through which form is created and brought into being. All my life since then, I've questioned things. Even before I got into the spiritual path, I started questioning things. When I left home, I knew my upbringing wasn't normal. I knew the way I'd perceive things wasn't normal. I questioned everything, why I breathe, why I walk the way I walk, why I perceive the way I perceive. Everything came into question for me, and I've never stopped that since. But yet the question has become different. Instead of an analytical questioning, which it was in the beginning, was more awareness. Once I learned to meditate, I learned to develop the awareness where I direct awareness towards something and watch what the awareness absorbs from experience. Awareness is a doorway I find between the world of time and the world of no time. And you can go through awareness and consciousness. Awareness, I find, is aware of, whereas consciousness, we become the thing. So awareness is aware of what it's observing, whereas when consciousness, we're in the experience itself. So if I'm aware of water, I can become the water. I become aware of the water's experience flowing over rocks, stone, gravel, whatever. I can be the gravel the water's flowing over. I can become the air that intermingles between the two.
You were 15. Did you at some point realize, oh, I must be dead?
I was aware, but I wasn't terming it as the word death. I was still present. Mm-hmm. I was still feeling as alive, if not more so, than I was in the physical form. And that's one thing I found ever since then. I go through a process of connection where I get back into that aliveness, which I've used at various times. Death is not the end. If anything, it's actually the beginning. One thing I've gained from my experience and other experiences since is realizing how limited life is. We think what we think is physical form is life. It's not. It's a very slowed down vibration, what life actually is. When we pass over, we really start tapping into what life is about. This is physical form, is life energy slowed down to appear in physicality. And there is no concept I have of it being the end. And there's various experiences I've had then where it has continued to show me the same, especially recently. Not that long ago, I was told I had a terminal diagnosis, and connecting into life has helped me not get caught up in that diagnosis. I acknowledge that's what the doctors said, but I find orientating into life, I feel a sense of healing effect going on in my body, which is sustaining in a way that I wouldn't have expected. But I had to have that diagnosis, so I let go of my final fear of death. Even though I'd had the original experience, there was still analytical doubt. This has relieved it. And to me, if I heal it enough, that diagnosis will disappear. But who knows? It doesn't matter whether it does or doesn't. The experiences I've been having lately, especially with nature, everything is just reinforcing. Nothing is the end. I'm touching things that are reinforcing that, showing me how that works and how to experience it. And I'm feeling more alive now than I ever have before. So long as I had that fear of death, which I did have to agree, but not like some people, that had to go. It's like the last vestiges of it had to go. Even though I had multiple experiences, there was still an element of it that needed to go. And what I'm able to do is to talk to people about life and what life is really about, which is experiencing vitality of each and every moment in a connected consciousness. And also, very big part is being in presence with, I'm going to use the classic term, Mother Earth, because she is a living entity which we live inside, which is her experience of us. We're in her atmosphere, and she feels like she's embracing us as children on a continual basis. I hope that helps somebody.
I want to thank you so much for sharing your near-death experience and your knowledge. You are so wise and alive, and I've really enjoyed speaking with you. Thank you so very much.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you very much. It's, yeah, uh, alive is the word. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. God bless.